But since man cannot return to one of the opposites unless he withdraws from the other, in order for man to return to the state of rectitude with the help of grace, it is necessary that he withdraw from the sin by which he had deviated from rectitude. And since man is directed to the ultimate end and is turned away from it mainly by the will, it is not only necessary that man withdraw from sin outwardly, ceasing to sin, but also that he withdraws from the will in order that he may rise from sin through grace. But a man willingly turns away from sin while he repents of the past and proposes to avoid the future. It is therefore necessary that a man rise from sin and repent of past sin and propose to avoid the future. For if he did not propose to desist from sin, sin in itself would not be contrary to the will. But if he wished to desist from sin, he would not grieve over past sin. It would not be the same sin that he committed, contrary to his will. But there is an opposite movement by which one withdraws from something to the movement by which one reaches it, just as bleaching is the opposite of blackening. Hence it is necessary that the contrary will withdraw from the sin by which it was inclined to sin. But she was inclined to sin through her appetite and delight in lower things. It is necessary, therefore, that he withdraw from sin by means of certain punishments by which he is afflicted because of the fact that he has sinned. For just as by pleasure the will was brought to consent to sin, so by punishments it is strengthened in the abomination of sin. Hence it is necessary that the contrary will withdraw from the sin by which it was inclined to sin. But she was inclined to sin through her appetite and delight in lower things. It is necessary, therefore, that he withdraw from sin by means of certain punishments, by which he is afflicted because of the fact that he has sinned. For just as by pleasure the will was brought to consent to sin, so by punishments it is strengthened in the abomination of sin. Hence it is necessary that the contrary will withdraw from the sin by which it was inclined to sin. But she was inclined to sin through her appetite and delight in lower things. It is necessary, therefore, that he withdraw from sin by means of certain punishments, by which he is afflicted because of the fact that he has sinned. For just as by pleasure the will was brought to consent to sin, so by punishments it is strengthened in the abomination of sin. Again, we see that even brute animals are withdrawn from the greatest pleasures by the pains of whipping. But he who rises from sin must not only detest past sin, but also avoid future sin. It is therefore appropriate that he should be afflicted for sin, so that he may be strengthened in the purpose of avoiding sin. In addition, those things which we acquire with labor and punishment, we love more and keep more carefully. Hence, those who acquire money by their own labor spend less of it than those who receive it without labor, either from their parents or in any other way. But this is most necessary for a man who has risen from sin, so that he may diligently preserve the state of grace and the love of God, which he has lost by negligently sinning. It is therefore fitting that he endure labor and punishment for the sins he has committed. Still, the order of justice requires that sin be punished. And from the fact that order is preserved in things, the wisdom of the governing God appears. It therefore belongs to the manifestation of divine goodness and the glory of God that punishment is paid for sin. But the sinner, by sinning, goes against the divinely established order, bypassing God's laws. It is fitting, therefore, that he should recompense this by punishing himself for what he had sinned before, for in this way he would be established entirely outside disorder. From this, then, it is clear that after man has obtained the remission of sin through grace, and has been reduced to the state of grace, he remains bound by the justice of God to some punishment for the sin committed. If he exacted from himself the punishment of his own will, he is thereby said to satisfy God, inasmuch as with labor and punishment he achieves the divinely instituted order, punishing himself for the sin which he had transgressed by following his own will. But if he does not demand this punishment from himself, since those things which are subject to divine providence cannot remain disordered, this punishment will be inflicted on him by God. Nor shall such a punishment be said to be satisfactory, when it was not of the patient's choice, but it shall be said to be purgatory, because by punishing another, he shall be purified, as it were, while whatever was disorderly in him is brought back to due order. This is why the Apostle says, 1 Corinthians 11:31, if we were to judge ourselves, we would certainly not be judged. But when we are judged, we are rebuked by the Lord, so that we may not be damned with this world. It must be considered, however, that when the mind is turned away from sin, the displeasure of sin and the clinging of the mind to God can be so intense that no obligation to any punishment will remain. For, as can be gathered from what has been said, the punishment which one suffers after the remission of sin is necessary for this, that the mind may adhere more firmly to good. For a person chastened by punishments, for punishments are a kind of medicine, and that the order of justice may also be preserved, while he who has sinned endures the punishment. Now the love of God is sufficient to strengthen a man's mind in good, especially if it has been intense. But the displeasure of past guilt when it has been intense brings great pain. Hence, by the intensity of the love of God and the hatred of the past sin, the necessity of a satisfactory or purgatory punishment is excluded. And if it is not so intense as to totally exclude the punishment, nevertheless, the more intense it is. But what we do through friends, we seem to do through ourselves, because friendship makes two out of one through affection, and especially the love of charity. And therefore, as through himself, so also through another man can satisfy God, especially when there is necessity. For even the punishment which a friend suffers for his sake, someone considers it as if he himself had suffered it. And thus the punishment is not wanting to him as long as he sympathizes with the patient friend, and so much more, inasmuch as he himself is the cause of his suffering. And again, the affection of charity in him who suffers for a friend makes a satisfaction more acceptable to God than if he suffered for himself. For this is a ready charity, and the other is a necessity. From this it is taken that one can make satisfaction for another, as long as both are in love. Hence it is that the Apostle says, Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens, and thus you will fulfill the law of Christ.